This will be an exploration of Northern Lakes College's Indigenous Administration Micro-Credential 6, Module 4, and participants will gain an understanding of what truth and reconciliation means in terms of Indigenous peoples in Canada. And this is just a gentle reminder to everyone participating that Northern Lakes College promotes a welcoming, respectful, fair, and inclusive environment. Please treat each other with respect and kindness. Disruptive or disrespectful behavior will result in removal from the session. Northern Lakes College respectfully acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 8 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 13 through 15 and 20 through 22, the traditional lands of First Nations and Métis peoples. We recognize the 15 First Nations, and 4 Métis settlements located throughout our service region. All right, we do have some supports available to participants in the session just because the content can be bring up a lot of emotions. So we do have some resources available if you need to reach out to anybody for support. And so I would just like to introduce you to the gentleman who's going to be speaking to us today. His name is Jason Big Charles. He has worked with Northern Lakes College for a number of years. He has developed and is currently the instructor for the Indigenous Administration program. That snippets from that program are being used to create these truth and reconciliation sessions. He has quite a large family of his own and a thriving personal life. He is a proud member of the Métis settlement of East Prairie. He's been a teacher for 20 plus years across various grades and in different settings. And in the past 13 years or so, he has focused on educational leadership. And that's all from me. So Jason, I'm going to stop my presentation and you can add in your presentation and take it away.
Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everyone. Yeah, I think I'll just introduce myself a little first. So my name is Whitehorse. Colonized name is Jason Big Charles, and I am joining you from the East Prairie Métis settlement where I've lived my whole life. And sounds like I need to update my bio there, Joanna. I am a father of 7 children, a grandfather of 17. So yes, my family is continuously growing, which I'm very happy and proud of. So like Joanna said, I've been an educator for 25 plus years now, working in various aspects, but the bulk of my experience comes from my teaching in the classroom. I was an elementary school teacher for well over 15 years, enjoyed that immensely. However, moved into administration and more into working with teachers, adults, administrators across Canada, bringing my background and my knowledge on Indigenous content and in my passion and fluency with curriculum and bridging the two together. So I'm really happy to be joining you today, especially on this week where we are recognizing a very important event throughout Canada, which is our recognition of our truth and reconciliation. Before we really get started in looking at the Indigenous Administration program, I just wanted to talk a little bit first about reconciliation itself. Because in terms of truth and reconciliation, I've spent a great deal of time with all of my knowledge holders and my elders and had a great deal of discussion over the years. And one of the things that I don't know why it slipped me for the longest time, but I couldn't think of a Cree word for reconciliation. So I sort of looked at the terms that were being used out there in terms of Cree language, especially since that's my background. And one of the words that's being used to, I guess, describe reconciliation has been Kwayaskwastasuan. However, when I talk to my elders about that, Kwayaskwastasuan in Cree language really refers to uh, sort of making something right. However, if you know the Cree language, our language is very contextual in nature. So that term in itself is really kind of specific to the context. So if I was, say, if if my house was messy and I was making it right, I would say Kwayaskwastasuin. But it didn't really relate to the overall concept of reconciliation. So I discussed that with my elders. And something interesting came out of the discussion with them, and it was a common discussion. And that discussion was always led back to, as Cree people or even as Indigenous people, and I'm fairly confident it's common amongst the other nations as well, but amongst Cree people, I can speak to, we do not have a term for reconciliation. And when I asked my elders about this, the response I got was, in terms of reconciliation, I don't think in our history that anybody ever did anything so wrongful towards somebody that to require reconciliation, because our culture and our ancestry is deeply rooted in Pastahoan, or the belief in Pastahoan. And when we talk about Pastahoan and Cree culture, that's the belief in the natural order. Some call it karma, some call it the universe taking care of keeping things in balance. But in talking with my elders about reconciliation, they said because we believe in Pastahoan, we had no concept of reconciliation. So, in terms of looking at moving forward with truth and reconciliation, we really have to look to the root of Indigenous worldview. So, if we're looking at a culture with a worldview that does not have a concept of reconciliation, makes it a little bit difficult to move forward, because once we look at the content in this micro credential, you're going to see what the how Western world defines reconciliation. And I just wanted to give you that little bit of background before moving into the content. But going right into the content, I'll just give you a little, for those that are not familiar with our Indigenous Administration Micro-Credential Certificate Program, I just wanted to give you a quick little overview of that. So I'm just going to share the information that the college has on its website about the micro-credential. And just bear with me while I find my, there we go. So what you're seeing here is once you go to the Northern Lakes College Continuing Education and Corporate Training website, you'll see we can look through and find the Indigenous Administration Certificate Program. And that's the program that I'm instructing for. With the program, the Indigenous Administration Certificate Program, you can go through and look at exactly what the program is. Uh, the program consists of micro-credential courses. So with a micro-credential course, it's very different from regular course studies, because with a micro-credential, we're looking at modules, generally 3 to 4 modules per micro-credential. And within those modules, each module is set to run a week. So a micro-credential course could run anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how many modules in that micro-credential. The majority run 3 weeks because the majority have 3 modules per micro-credential. So with those micro-credentials, we have 9 different topic areas with micro-credentials. And once you complete the 9 micro-credentials, you earn the Indigenous Administration Certificate. So there's the course information, who would benefit from Indigenous administration. So of course, these are anybody, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous professionals who work with any Indigenous population. And the major fields that we see interested in the program have been in education or industry, because these are both fields which are very active in Indigenous communities right now. And these are generally the people who want to either learn more about Indigenous subject matter, or even Indigenous people working towards reclaiming their culture through taking the program. So course information, you get an idea of what each of the micro-credentials consist of: treaties, land claims, Indian Act band councils, uh, Micro-credential 3, Indigenous self-government, Micro-credential 4, language and culture. We got hunting, gathering, and stewardship, ceremonies and protocols, educational partnership, industry partnership, and economic development. And you'll see a little bio of me if you wanted to read a little bit more about me. Then you'll see the delivery methods. Now with the micro-credential, it's generally very student paced because everything is, all of the program material is online. We do have one optional class, 1 hour class per week where you can engage with the instructor, myself, just to go over any difficulties in the course or wanting further information or discussion on the module content for that week. So that's a quick overview of the micro-credential program. So like I said, those who have never taken a micro-credential course before, it's a very student-led, student-directed, because all of the material is online, and each module does have 3 assessments that go with them. One is a reflection on the module content. The other assignment is posting in a discussion group on the module content, and then a quiz, a multiple choice quiz on the module content for that week. So that's just a quick overview of the micro-credential program and sort of what we're going to be looking at today, because we're going to be looking specifically at one of these micro-credentials, which is micro-credential number 6. So I'm just going to go to that now and just show you what that micro-credential would look like. Seeing micro-credential number 6, which is entitled Ceremonies and Protocol. However, as part of the ceremonies and protocol, we have the subject matter that we're wanting to look at today, which is module 4 within that micro-credential number 6, Truth and Reconciliation. I'll just give you a quick look at what a micro-credential course would look like online if you were taking the class. So this is exactly how it would look. Now this goes to one specific module, but this is how a module would look that you'd work through the material on. Once you get into Explore, these are the individual modules within the individual units within each module. So this is module 4, Truth and Reconciliation, and these are the units within that module. So the very first one, what is truth and reconciliation? We're going to walk through this together. What is truth and reconciliation? Now, almost every one of our units within the micro-credentials do have videos and other resource material along with information that'll help you to understand the topic of study. And then you'll see at the bottom, you've got to pause and reflect. So we're just going to watch this video here, and I'm pretty sure I shared the sound, so you should be able to hear it. And this is going to give us sort of an introduction to what is truth and reconciliation.
For reconciliation to work and for a relationship to be renewed, there must be awareness, acceptance, apology, atonement, and action.
If you notice on the TRC logo, at least what I perceive there is a circle of fire. In the analogy of that fire, ring of fire, you are the fire and I am the fire. And together we make the circle.
We have an extremely distinguished list of guests here today. It is an absolute honor to be in the same room.
Today's Health Talks is about helping us all gain a better understanding of reconciliation and how, as Canadians and public servants, we can live and work in ways that honor its intent.
This, of course, is just one conversation in a dialogue that is underway, a dialogue that I have to say is very, very long overdue. We have an unprecedented opportunity to achieve reconciliation between Canada and First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Now is the time to challenge previously held beliefs and to invest in strong relationships.
I think today's going to be a very important conversation. I'm really looking forward to the dialogue, to hear how we're going to continue to act on health and ensure that our Indigenous communities are put first.
I'm so excited for this event. First of all, I'm a First Nations public servant, and it means a lot to me to see that the health portfolio is beginning to have these types of talks to discuss reconciliation. It's been a long time coming.
Abel Boson, Grand Chief of the Cree Nation and Chairman of the Cree Regional Government. For me, reconciliation is about resetting the button. For me, it's about looking at the past, acknowledging that we've made mistakes in the past in all the different sectors, and then resetting that button and starting to work together, working on what the new government institutions should be, what the economic development partnership should be. So it's a new approach to, going forward.
My name is Brenda Reynolds, and I'm the former TRC Health Support Liaison. One first girl came forward and spoke her truth about being sexually abused. The constable and I would be interviewing and finding out what had happened. 17 times that happened that one night. 17 girls disclosed. And I was a young social worker.
My name is Cindy Blackstock. I'm a member of the Gitxsan First Nation, and I'm the Executive Director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society.
Reconciliation at its center is really about, for me, fundamentally two things. It is about respect, and it is about love.
Natan Obed, I'm the president of Inuit Tapui Kanatami.
Reconciliation is a really difficult concept for a lot of Canadians. And it's also a difficult concept for us as Indigenous peoples as well, because reconciliation isn't just about the relationship between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples in this country. It's also between generations of Indigenous peoples. It's between families of Indigenous peoples. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last 100 years that have driven us apart and are things that we need to overcome.
Listening alone is not enough. And I think that we need to take action. And there are different forms of action, individual, professionally, and so forth.
I would love to see political leaders give the public service not only permission, but support and protection for being insubordinate to bad ideas. We need to stop dehumanizing the impacts through either creation of acronyms, files, that type of thing. And we need to recalibrate our relationship so it's out of that savage and civilized dichotomy.
Reconciliation doesn't happen when we're all the same color at the table. It happens when there's different cultures and the diversity within the Indigenous people. As speakers sitting here, we all come from different tribes and different parts of Canada. And that should be reflective when you're looking at developing policies.
This is an ulu. That this is an Inuit women's knife. This item is Inuit specific, but is also evidence-based. It's also globally informed. The idea is that you don't question it. This is ours, and we've made it, and it is a symbol of Inuit culture today in 2018. So I want to make a deal with you. The same principle that you've blindly given me for this, that you can also apply to your work. That when you work with Inuit, you accept that when we come to the table with positions, they're Inuit specific, they're evidence-based, and they're globally informed.
Today we have the capability and we have the leadership, and God help us, we have the money to say to First Nations kids, you are worth the money, you are worth the sacrifice, you're worth us taking down whatever red tape gets in the way of you having a proper childhood. Because we can't say sorry again.
I think that's a good point to stop on, because one of the things that we really want to take a look at within this micro-credential was to be looking at building a definition of reconciliation and what that means. So I am just going to put that question out to those of you who have joined me today and ask you, what is your personal definition of reconciliation and what that looks like? And I'd welcome anyone to jump in and just give me some of your thoughts on that.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
What I do is continue to learn and take part in these type of sessions, and also to take part in one of the events that happened on September 30th, but also take part in the reading of the TRC 94 calls to action and continue to reflect on that and to do what I can in a meaningful way, and also to keep in mind that we have the 7 grandfather teachings to guide the way how we behave. Yeah, that's just what I do.
Thank you very much for that. And Jan, you heard that in a little bit of the video that we saw, where we had a few different ideas on what reconciliation was. You heard the chief talk, and he said it's about resetting the button, and then working together after resetting the button. We had a couple other thoughts there on reconciliation is coming together and recognizing the wrongs and working together to right the wrongs, as well as really looking at bringing that information to the children and making it clear that they're worth working together for a better future. However, again, when we look at that, where are we in terms of reconciliation? We're going to take a little closer look at the 94 calls to action, and I'll just give you some little bit more information on where we are in terms of meeting those 94 calls to action. But before we do that, I wanted to still work on this building a definition, because another thing you heard in the video was a lot of talk on action. We need to stop talking. We need to start acting. And one of the biggest things we've seen going on, especially in education over the past few years, has been the use of the term reconciliation, where we're taking the word reconciliation and putting it together with action, and then trying to build a focus on reconciliation, which of course is looking at the two and seeing what we can do beyond talking. However, in working with our elders and knowledge keepers, are we ready for action? We're always ready for action. However, I don't think we're done talking, because it's becoming more and more evident, and we see it daily, that all the truths haven't been out yet. We still don't have all of the truths. And what I'm really talking about is those people who have yet are still going through their healing, and unfortunately, some have never been able to go through their healing. Those who have attended residential school, but they're, after seeing more and more people talking, they're coming forward now. And again, because we really need to work on our definition of reconciliation. And it's funny that they talked about action in the video, because unfortunately, the actions we're seeing so far, do they really look at reconciliation? Working on that definition of reconciliation, what I'm talking about is we have some residential school survivors who are just now, just within the past days, coming forward and telling their stories of what they've gone through or what they experienced. And is it all negative? Yes and no. And I'll give you an example of a story from one of my uncles, actually, who attended residential school. So one of the things my uncle experienced, it was kind of a laughing point for us. At the same time, it was kind of like dark humor, where we see what they were going through, and yet they found a funny moment in the trauma that they were going through. So one of my older uncles had been in residential school for a year prior to his younger brother joining him. When his younger brother joined him, that uncle of mine said that he was terrified to go to residential school, because of course he spoke mainly Cree, number one. Number two, it was a strange place where the parents or no other, that whole family unit wasn't together. And the other thing was, he was terrified of the nuns that were running the residential school. And this is one of the local ones here to where I am in High Prairie. But he said the thing that terrified him about the nuns was that it looked like they didn't have legs, because of the habits that they wore that went down to the ground. So he said it terrified him because it looked like they were floating around. So of course, my older uncle, he said, didn't help him any, because when he did get a chance to talk to my older uncle and ask him about this, my older uncle told him that, well, yeah, they don't have any legs. They're using their bad powers to float around. So this made it worse for my younger uncle, and he thought, you know what, I'm gonna expose these bad powers that they have to float around with no legs. And it was in the lunchroom, and there was all the kids were together. He sort of snuck to where snuck up behind one of the nuns, and he lifted her dress up so they could all see that she had no legs, and that she was floating using magical powers or what have you. And of course, we know he saw legs and probably more than he wanted to see, but of course he got in trouble over this, and his meals were taken away for the rest of the day, and he was made to sit in a room, and he was punished harshly for this. But they laughed about this, and they continue to laugh about this experience that he went through. However, if we really look at that experience, we really see, although it's to them it was a laughing point, we see that we get just a glimpse of a one moment glimpse of what they were going through when they were put into that residential school. And although to them they'd say, well, that didn't traumatize me, we can easily see if it were one of our kids, how that could traumatize them. And that's something that they carry with them for the rest of our lives. So when we're looking at reconciliation, how do we reconcile traumas that we don't recognize are traumas? So this is what I'm saying about residential school survivors and the whole journey towards reconciliation. If they still can't recognize that they've been traumatized or that they've suffered through trauma, how can they move forward to working on that trauma and bringing that trauma to light so that they can move past it? So it's a very difficult task, especially when you're looking at children who are stripped from their families. So in defining reconciliation, we go right back to when I started, when I said that within Greek culture, we have no concept of reconciliation. We have no word for reconciliation. We have that the word that's a lot of people are using, "Koyaskwastasoan," but that again, that still means just putting something right. But that is in looking at what we really, how we define reconciliation, is that really what reconciliation is doing? Is it putting things right? So it's very important because how we define reconciliation will really go back to our personal experiences and in building that definition of reconciliation. So again, there I'll just share that that definition that they have in the module, which is of course the very westernized defining of reconciliation. So aims to address historical injustices, particularly in the context of human rights abuses, colonization, and systematic discrimination. It involves acknowledging and understanding past wrongs, often through the gathering of sharing of testimonials, documents, and other forms of evidence. This process helps to reveal the truth about what occurred during periods of conflict or oppression. So that is sort of the Western definition of reconciliation. So again, that module one, that unit one within module four really looks at defining, helping you define what reconciliation is and helping you to build a better understanding. But again, uh, like I say, it's really going to matter what your personal experiences are and what those experiences bring into your definition of reconciliation and what that might entail. And we saw just in that short clip, we didn't watch the full video, but we saw three different people talking about reconciliation, and we heard three different definitions of reconciliation. So it's very, very complex. It's not as simple as here's a definition. How do we achieve that? Because you saw the complexities of just defining reconciliation. So from there, we'll move on to unit number 2 within that micro-credential. Unit 2 within that micro-credential really starts to look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And it talks very broadly about the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, because that is what sort of birthed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission back in 2007, and the awarding of the dollars to support and build the mandate of that, what that commission would look like, and its roles and responsibilities. However, if we go to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission website. So this is Truth and Reconciliation Commission website. And if you look at the commissioners, these were the commissioners that sort of led the way. The Honorable Murray Sinclair Iban. And I say that because unfortunately, the Honorable Murray Sinclair Iban has moved on to our ancestors. And with that, and I just learned this through working with other elders and with Nigan Sinclair, the Honorable Murray Sinclair Iban's son. So and it's interesting because out of that discussion, I learned that with Anishinaabe, when somebody has gone on to our ancestors, we never say their name without adding Iban at the end of it, which in itself is sort of an act of reconciliation because we are acknowledging that that is Anishinaabe, a part of Anishinaabe worldview and way of knowing and being. So just those little small, seemingly small gestures are a way of moving forward with reconciliation and actually using that in everyday life. Wilton Littlechild is still with us, as well as Dr. Marie Wilson. And Wilton Littlechild and Dr. Marie Wilson continue to go and do talks throughout Canada on the work that they did. Because again, remember the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the number one role of them that they had was to travel throughout Canada and engage survivors of residential school and to start working on bringing out the truth about residential schools and working on testimonials and discussion with survivors on how we could move towards reconciliation. So that's really what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did, as well as those trailblazing commissioners at that time. So I'm just gonna stop sharing again, and we're going to, so from the work of the commission and the commissioners at that time, beginning in 2007 after the Supreme Court settlement, what came out of the 5 years that they spent in the field were 94 calls to action, formal calls to action that were made basically towards Canada and the Canadian government on how we move forward towards reconciliation and how we take a step forward in righting the wrongs of the past. So we're gonna, if we look at Unit 3 in this micro-credential Module 4, Unit 3 really takes a deeper look at those 94 calls to action. So I'm just going to share my screen again and go into Unit 3 of this micro-credential. 94 calls to action. Now, if you really want more information on each of the calls to action, by all means, if you search the summary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you can watch the YouTube video on that. Sorry. But I wanted to just give you a quick sort of update on the calls to action because this was work that started in 2007 and the commission, work of the commission lasted 5 years. They were in the field. So of course, this takes us to 2013 when the 94 calls to actions were brought forward. And out of those 94 calls to action, I generally like to keep up to date myself out of personal interest on the progress on those 94 calls to action. And unfortunately, the statistics out there and the summaries and the reporting on where we are with the 94 calls to action is very disturbing, because how many of those calls to action have been actually achieved? There are 2 calls to action of those 94 that have been achieved, while the rest of the 92 calls to action have had very little progress, or have met some progress. So it's very disturbing that in so many years since those 94 calls to action were brought forward, there's been very little action. Um, Now, once you get to know the calls to action, you'll really see that they're really gauged towards our Canadian government, as well as a lot of it has to do with mainly aimed at policies and procedures. So it's mainly uh, mainly put on the onus of leadership to really act on those calls to action and move forward with reconciliation through meeting those calls to action. Thankfully, here in Alberta, we've seen a little bit more progress, especially in the field of education. We have, right within our teaching quality standards, it is now a requirement for all teachers to be learning about Indigenous content and to be teaching about Indigenous content within their everyday teaching. And for those not in the teaching field, our teacher quality standards, they are guiding legislation. So it's not as though we can just easily dismiss them and say, okay, I'm required to do this. No, we are required by law now to learn this Indigenous content. So that is a very small measure, but it's a great measure of reconciliation, where we're actually mandating that especially educators need to learn and practice uh, in teaching Indigenous content, which is uh, which is one of the small pieces of reconciliation. But like I said, I think it's time we take a step back and really review, and really take that retrospective look on the journey that we've been through, right from residential school right to where we are now, and really look at understanding the culture before we can decide how to move forward. So like I said, it's first off understanding that within Indigenous worldview, there is no concept of reconciliation, because in general, there was and nothing they did within the culture or within their cultural history that really warranted reconciliation, because of that belief in uh, natural justice, or natural law with the Cree peoples. I know we call that pastaho, and that's something that guides our everyday living. So I think that's the first step, is in really taking a look at the worldview of Indigenous people, and then looking at how to move forward together. One of the things our elders really talk about in terms of reconciliation is, although they're honored to be asked to come forward and take part in reconciliation events, or even leading these events, they're really starting to reflect and look back. I had a number of elders already ask the question, why am I being asked to speak on reconciliation as an Indigenous person? Because in my view, as an Indigenous person, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to survive, so why do I have to be the one leading the way in reconciliation? So keep that in mind when you're really looking at ways of moving forward with reconciliation. Should we be approaching residential school survivors, or should we be approaching Indigenous elders and asking them to lead the way in reconciliation? We really have to ask that question if the feeling is, why should I lead the way if I wasn't doing anything wrong? So it's, and that really hit a chord with me and those elders that did come forward and bring that, have that discussion with me. And it really made me take a step back and say, you know what, you're right. If I've wronged somebody, should should the person I wronged have to lead the way in forgiveness? So if I wronged you, if I did something wrong to you, think of how that would make you feel if I asked you to lead the way to forgiving me, or having you lead that way. And again, if we really look back on all of the definitions we've looked at as reconciliation, that really goes against that whole idea of reconciliation, because one of the commonalities you see in any definition is that idea of working together and moving forward together. So I hope that you enjoyed the content today, and you will look at our micro-credential number 6, especially module number 4 on truth and reconciliation.